It's similar to the classic tune. I left. She was the woman who stood by Elvis Presley when the spotlight started to burn instead of shine. San Francisco is where I last saw him. For years, Linda Thompson remained silent, never earning money or selling stories. But now, years after Elvis's passing, Linda is speaking up, and the tabloids weren't prepared for it. It has deeper depth, tenderness, and rawness. This report on an ex-girlfriend isn't your typical one. It tells the account of the man who created the story and the lady who fell in love with him while no one else did. Before she ever entered Graceland, Linda Thompson was already a famous person. They referred to her as the girl who walked into Graceland. She had more than simply a lovely face. After winning the title of Miss Tennessee in 1972, she immediately gained recognition for her poise, intelligence, and depth of feeling. Despite coming from a modest Southern family, she exuded the poise of someone who had experienced both hope and suffering. Beneath her beauty pageant grin was a fiercely devoted lady with ambitions that far exceeded the title. Hollywood noticed her. In Nashville, she was spotted. However, for Elvis Presley, things were extremely different. In July of that year, they met in Memphis at a private screening of a film. A friend unexpectedly invited her, so she wasn't even expected to attend. When Elvis entered the room, everything changed. However, Linda did not faint. She didn't lean into or thrive on the limelight. She gave him a close look, but she didn't see the king. The man was really worn out, and not just from traveling or the attention. On the inside, he appeared exhausted. He looked so lonely amid all that brightness, not because he was famous. He had to feel exhausted because that individual didn't need him back. Linda claimed that they had no walls or plots and spoke till dawn that night. He told her anecdotes from his early years that he hadn't shared in years. He discussed his worries about growing older and his mother. She didn't treat him like a king or give him compliments. All she did was listen with honesty, kindness, and laughter. When she departed the following morning, Elvis referred to her as the light he had been seeking. However, dark shapes were already emerging beneath the gleam of Graceland. Loving the king wasn't a dream come true. Linda moved into Graceland shortly after their first meeting. I initially thought I had entered a fairy tale. Music was playing constantly, and there was riches and love. Each room felt like a living museum of brilliance. The mansion was filled with gold records, and the halls were filled with laughter. However, Linda soon discovered that things were far more challenging than the velvet drapes and chandeliers suggested. Graceland was more than simply a home. It was a fortress and a prison. She was more than simply his partner. She was his confidant, his rock, his caregiver, and eventually his nurse. Elvis slept very little. His dreams were awful. Sometimes I'd stay up all night just to make sure he was okay, she claimed in a rare interview. He would wake up sweating and experiencing inexplicable dreams. He would take numbing medications to help him relax, but they didn't solve the problem. She would give him a back rub and occasionally say a prayer aloud to help him relax. He was too huge for the world, like a child. After holding him and soothing him, Linda would return him to his bed. There were moments of immense joy, such as late-night laughter, spontaneous songwriting, and silent praying. They watched old movies or danced barefoot in the living room. But each time, the blackness returned. The glitter of celebrity couldn't hide the melancholy in his eyes. She loved him because he was a broken man seeking peace, not because he was the rock and roll king. She saw something that some people couldn't or wouldn't see. It took a while for anyone to realize how dependent he was on prescription medications, but she witnessed it. Linda never gave him instructions. She never declared her intention to depart. Through all of his mistakes, restless nights, and quiet apologies, she kept his hand. She stated, "I was there to love him, not to fix him, not to leave him. She hoped love could be enough to win him back, so she hung on as long as she could. However, love has its boundaries, and Linda was subtly approaching them. Why she actually left Elvis? For years, many believed she had left Elvis for another man or fame. When they noticed a gorgeous young woman leave Graceland, they assumed it was because she was motivated rather than depressed. According to some, she used him for power. She might not be able to handle being with someone so well known, according to some individuals. However, Linda never stopped telling stories. She preferred to keep quiet rather than make headlines and let them go because she didn't feel bad about it. It was motivated by respect. She never intended to profit from his notoriety or make their relationship a story for the press. She knew what they had was genuine, no matter how shattered it got. She actually left to survive in the end. "I didn't want to be a widow at 27, she subsequently stated, her voice trembling with grief. Elvis Presley's health was a ticking time bomb in 1976. He was becoming worse, not just exhausted. He was constantly exhausted, experienced mood swings and energy slumps, and spent a lot of time feeling emotionally alone. I felt like I was watching him slowly disappear," she said, recalling that moment. Some days he barely spoke, other days he collapsed mid-conversation. Sometimes she didn't even recognize the man she loved when she looked at him. "Rest, clean up, and fight," she pleaded. He promised to do it. His pledges disintegrated like the melodies he used to sing so brilliantly, even though he meant them at the time. There was no villain in their tale. It simply had heartbreak, addiction, and time. But she wasn't angry when she left. There was no altercation, no grandiose parting. She packed quietly, wept quietly, and gave him a cheek kiss before she went. She left the door open, and her heart open as well. It said something like, "I'll be here if you ever need me." But she was never truly gone. However, what transpired next demonstrated the depth of their bond. The call she will never forget. Only a few months following Linda's departure from Graceland, Elvis called. It was late enough in the evening for the sound of silence to be broken by recollections of the past. When the phone suddenly rang, she felt as though she was hearing a ghost. She didn't anticipate hearing from him in that manner or at that particular moment. He lacked polished charisma and dramatic charm, and his voice lacked energy. He sounded tired and weaker. It was no longer charming, blustery, or legendary. He sounded like a man who was furious and had run out of defenses. His hands seemed to be trembling from holding things together. He was mentally exhausted in addition to physically exhausted. He spoke with a heavy tone, as if he were depressed. Then he replied, "I know now that you were the only one who really cared about me," which struck to her heart. Linda concluded, "That call broke me." She had been in silent agony for months, unsure if leaving him had liberated him or injured him. It was her hope that the time apart would aid in his recovery, and that he would find a cause to get up without her. She wished her absence would encourage him to engage in combat. Rather, she hurt a man who was nearly dead already. Instead of being determined, he sounded as though he knew the end was coming, but was unable to bring himself to flee. She assured him she still believed in him and pleaded with him to get assistance. However, only a few weeks after declaring he would try, Elvis Presley passed away. For the rest of her life, Linda would think about that final conversation. Why she remained silent for so long. Unlike other people, Linda didn't write a tell-all until many years later. She had many opportunities. Publishers promised hefty payouts and even bigger promises, front pages, bestseller lists, and talk shows when the papers phoned. She could have profited on scandals, shattered hearts, or secrets held in Graceland, but she didn't. Linda declined since she didn't think Elvis was significant. He sacrificed everything for the world until nearly nothing remained. He was a sensitive, wounded, and intelligent soul. He was more than simply the king in her mind. When the lights went off, he sobbed with her while holding her hand in the dark. She stated softly years later, "I wanted to protect what little dignity he had left." Even when others spoke, she remained silent. Linda chose to remain composed despite insiders and ex-lovers fabricating stories, exaggerating interactions, and portraying him as a cartoon character with excessive behavior. Grace was her choice. For her, the truth was a sacred, serene, and undisturbed garden. However, being silent does not imply that you were not present. She didn't forget or choose not to speak, though. She didn't discuss him in her book A Little Thing Called Life until 2016, nearly 40 years after his passing. She didn't write to shock, blame, or spread rumors even in those early days. To honor, she wrote, "He was human, and that's what made him divine," she stated. "Through the good and the terrible, I adored him." Her remarks were shocking and did not make the press. They created waves because they cared. They demonstrated to everyone that each emblem represents a shattered yet lovely human being. She didn't say anything particularly strong. In addition to helping him recover, they altered the perception that Elvis would always have among his admirers. They had a secret inside Graceland's walls. Linda mentioned to Elvis that they had previously discussed growing old together. It was more than simply hushed rumors about idols. It was open, hopeful, and genuine. They envisioned a more laid-back and unhurried life, free from the demands of celebrity and travel. She stated in her autobiography, "He wanted to settle down, have another child, live more quietly." Elvis lowered his guard during those intimate moments and spoke of a future that seemed imminent. He longed to go to the country to create songs by himself, fish in the mornings, and finally sleep without constant surveillance. He hoped to remarry and perhaps start a family. He desired to be a man once more, not just a fantasy. However, Elvis frequently grieved by himself over his anxieties, which he hardly ever shared with others, so his aspirations were always just out of grasp. Being forgotten, and dying alone in a house full of people who loved his fame more than they loved him was his biggest nightmare. He feared that he might pass away too soon. According to Linda, he never overcame his phobia. She tried her hardest to assist. She gave him dietary advice, read passages from spiritual books to him, and even walked him through late-night meditation. Sometimes it did the trick. For a while, he would smile, laugh, and even dance. The light would return. However, nothing was able to keep him tranquil for very long. Despite the difficulties, he never stopped talking to her. Even when he was unable to relax, he continued to trust her. In ways he never did with anyone else, he relaxed. They confided in one another about their anxieties, previous hurts, and secrets. They shared information amongst them that no one else was aware of. Until now, she had kept one of those secrets, the vow she would not betray. Before she departed Graceland, Elvis gave her one piece of advice. "Don't let them make me into a joke." His voice cracked as he said. He was half giving up, half pleading. He was prepared for the focus from everyone on his downfall, the jokes, and the rumors. He feared that people would only recall his fall, not his magic, music, or films, and how he took medications, acted strangely, or appeared puffy. She vowed not to allow it to occur as she met his gaze directly. She didn't. She remained silent for decades while others told the press stories. Now, whenever she talks about him, she never feels sorry for him. His intelligence, humor, and kindness were astounding. She talked about his odd sense of humor, the scribbled notes he would leave around the house, and how happy he was as a kid watching cartoons in an interview with People magazine. She stated he was upset, of course, But who isn't? Not because she had to, but because she loved him. She took care of his image. Genuine, enduring, and unending love. She simply grinned when asked if she no longer loved him. What she learned from Elvis about losing a loved one today. Linda Thompson is 74 years old. She is a survivor, a writer, a mother, and a beacon of compassion. She led a lavish life in Hollywood and appeared on numerous red carpets. She has raised 2 boys and received an Emmy for her songwriting. Bruce, who is now Olympic gold medalist Caitlyn Jenner, and renowned music producer David Foster were the first people she fell in love with again. She experienced ups and downs in each relationship, but none of them compared to her bond with Elvis. Elvis wasn't only a lover, after all. He taught her many lessons and broke her heart for the first time. She once stated, "He taught me what devotion costs and what it looks like." That type of love never diminishes. She occasionally returns to Graceland without warning, in private, and out of sight of the cameras. She wanders down some familiar hallways. There, they would laugh long into the night. She offers the man flowers, not for the icon, at the location where he used to perform religious music on the piano until dawn. Due to the fact that love endures. All it does is change form. The most crucial reality. Linda Thompson never made an effort to alter Elvis's values. She simply returned its heart to it. She revealed to everyone that beneath all the rhinestones was a guy, a man who was tough, gorgeous, and tortured and who wished to be noticed. Lastly, we do it via her eyes. If you were moved by this tale, please comment below. What aspects of Elvis do you believe he would have liked to be remembered? Remember to follow, like, and share for more previously untold stories.